Hey everybody, this is Zachary Lewis again with another tutorial on working with Ogmo Editor 2.0. I guess in this case, 2.1.0.2. Today we're going to go into adding properties to levels themselves, adding more entities in our game, and pulling in the level data to flesh out our game a little bit more. Last time, if you remember, we learned how to make a brand new project and made a grid layer for collision. We also learned how to place a player start and save and load our levels and basically just work with the Ogmo Editor. So I've made a couple changes to the code. So now we can load in multiple different levels because each stage is going to have more than one level. So you can see that we got 3 levels here. We need to name them. And then when we go in, we still have our grids being brought in, and when we hit the wall, we lose. So the first thing we want to do is be able to add a name to our levels so it's not just called level. So let's go ahead and open the Ogmo project. We're going to edit this project. Let's add a couple values here in the level values section. Now what these are going to be is properties for each specific level. So we'll make a string called name. This will obviously be the name of the level. And we'll default it to untitled level. Let's create another one. We'll name it speed in case we want to change the speed of the player in the future. And minimum of 100, maximum of 1,000. We'll default it to 200, which is the current player's speed. We can round to the nearest tenth. That's fine. Now when we go into a level, we can hit Control L or go to level properties, and you'll notice that we also have 2 more fields here, the name and the speed. So let's go ahead and add a couple properties to our levels. So we have 3 levels here, and you notice that they're just named OD underscore and then a level value. This is important for quickly adding levels, which I'll show you in a moment. So let's go ahead and name these levels. So this is the first level. We'll name this welcome. Sometimes we get errors. Just continue on that guy. Save him out. All right, so this one's a little bit trickier. So we'll name it get ready. And we'll just ignore those for right now. And finally, we will rename this level. And we'll call this one explore. Apply, whatever. So now let's go back into our source code. Let's give it a test. So it still says level, nothing new there. That's because we need to set the level name. So if you notice my comments, I used to do colon. If you look in the tasks tab on Flash Develop, you can see a list of all of the tasks that we currently have. So we'll scroll down to the bottom, get level name from XML in our level menu item. So our level menu item passes in a level data, and we want to get the name of the level instead of just calling it level. So we'll create a new XML. We'll just name it XML for right now. And like we did last time, we'll use FlashPunk's built-in XML setup, get XML, and we pass in our XML data. So now we can just read our XML like any other and say the name equals XML dot the attribute name and save that. So now when we run it, you'll notice that it's pulling in the name. Now for a second, let's talk about why we named our levels OD1, OD2, as opposed to just naming them welcome or get ready. In our levels class, you notice that we have just imported 1, 2, and 3, and here we've imported 1, 2, and 3. Now in our menu world, we iterate through those until it becomes null. So we create a string, and we name it OD1, OD2, OD3, when it reaches OD4, it can't find that variable there. So you can imagine if I had to type out each thing and manually enter them as opposed to just doing a simple iterator like this, it would take a lot more time to add a single level. So this way we can just make as many levels as we want, name them 0 to however many, and our source code will automatically parse all of the level names, which is really great, especially when you're working with a multi-level game like this. However, our levels aren't very interesting yet. We should add some stars for the player to collect as a challenge, and we should add a finish line so the player just doesn't crash into the wall and die. So let's go back into our Ogmo editor. We'll go ahead and edit the project. And we need a couple more entities. So first we'll create one, and we'll name it finish. Now this is the finish line that the player will reach. We're going to set this at 8 by 8 because it's tiny little blocks, and we'll make it resize both X and Y. That lets us stretch it to be the appropriate size for our finish line. And we have an image file for this. It's in Assets, Finish Line. And we do want this to tile because it's going to create a little background for our player to reach. Now we also want to add some stars for them to pick up. So we'll name it star, and we only want 3 stars per stage. So each stage will have 3 stars, and that'll be the challenge mode. It's not resizable or rotatable, but we do have an image file for that as well. Star. We'll apply that, and it'll close all of our levels. So let's go ahead and open those levels back up. So now you notice in our entities, we have finish and star. So let's go ahead and start on our first level. It's a very simple level. So we'll just give them the first star, teach them, what that means to pick up a star, and then we'll set a couple that are a little bit out of the way so they have to navigate. And now the finish line, we'll just start it up here. Now it scales based on its upper corner. So we'll use the resize tool, and we'll click and drag to set the size of our finish line. And that's it. We'll save that file out. So level 2, again, we'll place our stars, put them down in that valley up there. And then this forces the player to spin around, and they have to learn how to turn. We'll resize the finish line to be that big. We'll save him out. And for our level 3, we'll set a star up there, star right there, and a star down in this crevice. And this one they have to explore the map. So we'll set the finish line up here. We'll resize that. So this will actually allow them to miss this first star. Now let's talk about the star limit that we added in Ogmo. If I try to place a 4th star, it's going to remove the first star that we placed. As you can see, that star's no longer there. And so as we add more stars, it will replace the last placed star. So we'll just go ahead and replace those stars where we wanted them and save the level out. So now we have our levels set up with finish lines, names, and stars to collect. However, we aren't loading in the finish line or the stars to our level. So let's go into our action script and do that. At the bottom of Game World, in the load map where we did the rest of our stuff last time, we need to add code for the stars. So we want to iterate through each star, and those are XML nodes. So let's go ahead and take a look. So notice in our level, we have an entities node and then a star node. Now you remember last time we used the entities player start node. But now we're going to iterate, and if we use a for each on the XML, it'll actually go through each of the stars. So node, which is defined up here as an XML, for each node in our map XML, .entities, .star, I'm going to add a new star. And star is a entity and entity that I've already set up for you. and it wants an X and a Y location. And it wants them as ints, so that's why we're typecasting them here. Getting the property Y and X from our star. So this will populate, it'll go through all three of these stars and add them. So now we want to add our finish line. And each map could have multiple finish lines, so we want to iterate again here. So for each node in map.xml.entities.finish, it's right here. Want to get a handle to that. Don't type P, that doesn't do anything. Want to add a new finish line, finish area. And you'll notice that I've already created a finish area which handles the player touching it and slowing down and whatnot. And that requires an X, a Y, and also a width and height. So add the X, add the Y, add the width, and we'll add the height. And that's it. So we've iterated through all of our stars and all of our finish areas and pushed them into the game. So let's try it out. So let's start at the first stage. All right, so you notice that we now have stars that we can pick up. Missed that guy. Got him. And then when we hit the finish line, we slow down and end. When we hit spacebar, it brings us back to the next stage. So you can see that we've pulled these through, and now the player can beat each level. So to recap, first we talked about setting level properties to allow us to name each of our stages. We talked about pulling in multiple levels with an iterator instead of manually doing it by hand. We talked about adding more entities for the finish line, which we could resize, and the star, which we only had 3 of them per stage. Again, I'm Zachary Lewis, and thank you very much.